Hi guys, this second part of the Codemoji slider game is going to be now the coding for the actual game. So we are going to do a little bit of that in this video, and then part two will be a little bit of more coding just because we have a lot to go on for these. So here we're going to be in the start screen sprite at first, and we're going to drag out a win flag clicked, and we're going to show it because we want to make sure that when the game starts, we want to see that start screen. With that being said, we also want to make sure it's in the right position. Before we do that, let's just hide all of these sprites, all the other ones, just so we don't see them right now, so we can position our start screen correctly. So we're going to do go to XY, and right now we can't see my start screen on the program viewer, but we are going to just test out a couple different XY options and see where that goes. So I'm going to click win flag clicked. You can see it's kind of off center, so I'm just going to manually drag it to where I think is going to be centered. And I'm also going to set the size a little bit smaller. And so I'll do like 80%, I think is good. So here we did like 80%. And then we're also just going to make sure that these borders are showing. So when flag clicked, we want to have them show all the time and go to the front layer, so that they'll be always in front of the screen so it looks like it's actually a game screen. So now I'm just going to mess around and try to fix this start screen a little bit more. But we'll go back to the start screen, and we want to make sure that it's switching from the costume 1 to costume 2, where it says collect 10 stars to find bamboo. And so we'll first have it start with costume 1, and then we want it to have it wait in event, or in control, sorry. We're gonna have it wait a couple seconds, so let's say I think 3 seconds would be good. And then we're gonna have it switch to the second costume. So this requires no clicking of buttons, clicking of the sprites. It's just gonna show the screen, the start screen switch on its own. So we'll grab another wait a couple seconds before it actually tells the game to start. And how we'll do that is we're going to broadcast a message from the yellow event section called broadcast, and we'll change that to start game. So once we've done that, we have a good starting screen for the game. We're going to drag out a when I receive message, and we're going to make sure it's the when I receive start game message, because we want it to hide after it receives that start game, okay? So we're going to go to looks, and we're going to choose start game first for when I receive message. We're going to do hide. And so now when we click the flag, you'll see shows the costume 1 for 3 seconds, then costume 2 for a couple more seconds so you can read the instructions, and then it goes to the blue backdrop screen, which is where our actual game will be. So after doing that, we're going to want to switch to the ground sprite. And so our borders are all good, just checking on that to make sure that they're in the front layer, sorry. But then now we want to make sure that our ground is positioned correctly. And if you guys remember how I showed my game in the first part, the ground is kind of leveled nicely. So we'll have it start, instead of when flag clicked, we're going to do when I receive the message start game. And when you receive the start game message, you want it to go to a specific location. So I'm going to set it as 00 first, just to see where that goes. And then we're going to do a when flag clicked and make sure that it is hiding at first. Just to make sure that it doesn't pop up over our start screen, but then when I receive start game, we want it to show in that position that we chose. So we're just going to see on the program viewer screen, it should start about there. but we will see where it's actually going to show. But we got to make a variable first called, sorry, let me think for a second, stop. And so stop variable is going to be kind of the game over variable. And so we're going to set our stop variable to 0 at first, and this means what we're going to do for this variable is treat it as a Boolean variable, which I know is a weird word, but it's only zeros and ones, and 0 means false and 1 means true. And so when the game is started, it means it's not going to stop when it's 0, okay? We're going to use a repeat until from the control section, and we're going to say to change x by -3. And what this is going to do is it's going to make the game, or the ground, look like it is scrolling from the right to the left. And we want it to repeat until a certain x distance or x position that it reaches. So we're going to drag out an equal option, and we're going to, actually, sorry, I mess that up. We're going to have it repeat until the game is over, which means stop equals 1. So stop equals 1 means stop equals true, which then means that game over equals true. So the game is no longer working, okay? But it'll also stop, or it'll also repeat until our x position, as I had mentioned before, our x position is less than a certain negative number, that's the edge of the screen. And so I did a very big negative number on the left there, and I did -480. So if you see, it's way off. And then we're going to want to do an OR operator from the green section. So it's going to say OR, and it's going to have 2 gray diamonds, and you'll drag both of those stop equals 1 and x position less than -480. Put that in the OR function, and that'll be what our ground repeats until, okay? So repeat until stop equals 1 and x position is less than -480, which means the ground has scrolled that far and it needs to start cloning, which is where we're going to go and grab an if-then-else statement below. And in this section, we are going to make a new variable, and this variable is going to be called change, or scroll x, I'll say instead. And so scroll x is going to say how our game actually changes. So we're going to set a variable, we'll put it out on the side right now, set scroll x to 0, which we'll switch in a second. And then we're going to drag out just one of the bubbles for the variable scroll x, because we'll use it in an operator in a second. But right now we're going to say if scroll x is greater than 0, then set scroll x to 0. And then as well, we are going to, inside that else, if scroll x is not greater than 0, if it equals 0, then we want to set x to we're going to pick an multiplication, actually, sorry, an addition option inside of an addition option. So an addition and multiplication option from the operator section, it's going to say scroll x plus, so set x to scroll x plus, and we're going to do a random, or that same number from above, so 480, but the positive number, and then times 0. It doesn't have to be that exact same, but this section, it's a little bit confusing to explain, but this set x to scroll x plus this number is going to make it look seamless. So it's going to keep cloning itself, as we'll do in a second. It's going to keep cloning itself, the ground is, until it looks like the ground is scrolling forever. So we're going to, above the repeat until, we're going to do create clone of myself. So now we have to tell it when it starts as a clone of itself to do something. We're going to drag out a when I start as a clone from that control section. And then we're going to go up to the motion section and we're going to set X to, again, we're going to change this variable to about 480. So the same variable or value that we had for our X position less than and for our scroll X option, we're just going to keep it to that. This was all kind of just experimentation values. You can try different values if you want to make it look like it's scrolling faster or scrolling more seamlessly, but it's just kind of test and go. So now we'll drag out another repeat until, and in here we will have a change X by, right now it says 10, but we're going to also have pretty much that same section that we see there, that repeat until, that's going to be over in our when I start as a clone section. So we'll keep doing that, okay? So I can copy that with Control or Command C if I want, and then just paste that. But if you guys don't know how to do that copying, then just re-drag out those same blocks that you see here, pause, and copy those, and that'll work. So now we're going to go back to the control section and drag out another if-then block. And here we'll have another variable. We'll drag in our stop variable, which we're just going to keep on the screen for right now because we need an operator. And we're going to say if stop equals, and in this case, instead of 0, this is going to say if the game is going as well. 0 equals true, 1 equals false, or sorry, 0 equals false, 1 equals true. So as long as stop equals 0, then it means the game is still going. So here then, when I start as a clone, if the game is still going, then keep creating a clone of myself. I know it's a bit confusing because we keep doing the same blocks, but I promise you, just follow along with these blocks. And then here, we're going to have that same repeat until option that we have up above. I just copied and pasted it. You don't know how to copy and paste, just re-copy these same blocks that you see. But instead of negative 480, I'm going to do negative 800. And I'll change that to 0 up there just because I want to test out a different value and see how that works. It might not work, so we'll see in a second, but I think that should be what we're going to do. And then we're going to also change X by negative 3 as well. So that's going to tell us how slow or how fast we want our ground to scroll. If you want it faster, do like negative 5 or negative 10. I think negative 3 worked best. And after in that section, we want to delete that clone. So after doing all of that, when I start as a clone section, you're going to always close it off with delete this clone. So now we're going to press flag. And so it shows our start screen, costume 1. And then it's going to switch to our second costume for the start screen. And then now we should see our ground, okay? And if we see it is way zoomed in, I don't like how the grass really looks, so I'm probably going to fix that in a second. But also it is going kind of slow. So I'm going to change some values real quick. We'll go to looks and make it look smaller. So here, if you guys see on the program viewer, it looks like the grass is getting smaller. I'm just going to add some more grass on the bottom in the same color. You guys don't have to do this. I'm just being picky about how I want my grass to look since it's a tutorial video for you guys. But now we'll do flag clicked again and see how that looks. So now our grass is scrolling. And I know it looks a little bit slow on my end. I realize that's actually just because of my recording and how that affects it, but it should look fine on your guys' end. If you still want it sped up, then do that. Now we're going to go to our clouds for a little bit. So your cloud sprite, if you created any clouds, if you did not, that's totally fine. You can skip this section, but we'll drag out a when flag clicked, and we want to hide the clouds first. We want to hide all the components that are not a part of our start screen when the flag is clicked. So we'll go to looks and drag out hide. And then in the event section, we're also going to drag out when I receive start game. Okay. Most of our game sprites will have both. So when flag clicked and when I received start game. And so in this section, we're going to tell it to go to the front layer, or sorry, go to the back layer, my bad. Go to the back layer because that means that if the robot jumps over it, so Bolt, if he jumps up and looks like he's flying over the clouds, then it'll not go in front of him. We're going to also set that stop to 0, which means that the game is going. And we're going to do another repeat until. And so I'm going to set stop to that. We're going to pretty much do that same repeat until function that we did before, where we create a clone of ourselves. Sorry, we don't need that yet, actually. We'll wait for a second to do that. We're going to do that same repeat until stop equals 1 or x position is less than a certain number. And so I'm just going to copy and paste that from our ground. You guys can copy and paste if you know how to do that too. I'm just doing this for time for you guys, but pause and copy these if you cannot copy and paste. But we have a lot of code to do, so sometimes I'll have to take an easy way to do that. And I'm going to change those x position values to -300, and then that scroll x value to +300. And this just makes it scroll a little bit at a little bit of a different pace than the ground, so it looks like it's not completely going with it. Then above that, a repeat until, and below set stop, we're going to have a create clone of myself. It can go below if you want, but it doesn't necessarily matter as long as it's not in the if else or the repeat until loop. And then as well, we're going to copy that when I start as a clone, and that's going to be the same in the cloud sprite section, okay? So when I start as a clone, we're just going to change some values again in there. Like we had the -300 here and the 300 there. We're going to change those values over here. So that'll be about -480 now. And this, again, is up to you if you want to experiment, try different values. I'm just saying these are what worked best for the game speed that I wanted. Then as well, we want to make sure that when we start as a clone, that it shows. We're not going to put that under when I receive start game, because if we do, then sometimes the clouds will double clone. I know it sounds weird, but we're only going to show it if it's a clone, not if it's the original. So now if we look, we can see my clouds scrolling along at the same pace as my ground, except for my ground just stopped. So we're going to go back to our ground and try to figure out what's going on there. Let's just change those values to like -500 and 500 and see what that does. That didn't do anything, so I'm going to mess around a little bit more with some values. In the end, now I got it to work with some different values. If you want to pause and look at what those were, feel free, but it made it look like it was running seamlessly. So now we've got pretty much all of these right, but I want those clouds a little bit smaller because they're pretty big right now on the screen. So we're going to do about set size to 70%. I think that will be good. So we're going to wait for our start screen to go. Here we see the clouds are just the perfect size, so I'll keep them at that. And then we're going to also check if we need to change any of the location of the clouds. So right now they seem fine, but let's move on to the code for bolts now, which is our main character of the game. So we're going to do a when I receive start game, we're going to show bolts, and then also we want to make sure that he's hidden when we click the flag. As I said, all the game pieces will be like that. So they'll hide when the flag is clicked, and then show. And I'm just going to set his size because I'm sure he's going to be pretty big or pretty small. He's pretty big. So we're going to set him down to like 40% first. And there, he's still too big. Let's try 25. Again, he's just a tiny bit big, so I'm going to try to set him to like 20. And I think this should be good. But you guys, again, experiment with the different sizes of your character. There, he looks perfect. And we want to make sure that he's sitting so he looks like where you position him. And we're going to do that with the go to XY coordinates. I'm going to make sure he looks like he's sitting on the grass or riding along the grass. So my value ended up being at like y negative 14. Obviously, he's going to move when he's going, but you want to set him to a specific position so that he keeps going. Now, I forgot to do this in the sprites section, or sprites part 1, but we're going to make 3 costumes, so 4 costumes overall for Bolts, to make it look like he's standing normally. And you'll copy and paste regular Bolt into all of those, but we want to make him look like he's turning right. So you're going to tilt him to look like he's going in the right direction. And this is just aesthetics thing that I'm doing, but now these lines that I'm drawing behind him kind of look like he's got speed, like he's going fast. And we'll do that for the left direction when you tell him to go left. And then as well, we want to make it look like he's jumping. And so we'll do these guys, okay? So there, in all these cases, we have Bolts normal, we have Bolts going right, and then Bolts going left, as well as Bolts jumping. We want to make sure, though, that when we start, so we'll rename them left and then jump, and then I'll keep Bolts normal for when he's just standing. We want to make sure that costume starts for Bolts, so he just looks like he's going normal. And then once we've done that, we also want to make sure that he's pointing in the direction that we want him to go, which is in the right direction, which is direction 90 or 90 degrees. After that, we are going to go and drag in a repeat until function. And this is where that stop variable is going to come back into play again. And it's going to say repeat until stop equals 1. So we're going to drag out that stop bubble variable. We're going to have an equal sign again, or equal operator. And there we'll have stop. I started typing on accident, but we'll have stop equals 1. So this is going to tell our bolts to keep doing something, which we're going to tell them to move, but it's going to keep doing that until game is over, which means stop equals 1. So then we're also going to create a new if-else loop inside of that repeat until loop. And here we're going to create a new variable called on the ground, okay? And what this means is this is also going to be a Boolean value. 0 equals false, so it means he's not on the ground, and then 1 equals true. Bolt is touching the ground. So we're going to set that to if on the ground equals 0. So if he is up in the air, then we're going to want to switch his costume to jumping costume. So when he's not on the ground, that means he's obviously up in the air, so we're going to switch him to jump. Else, if he's not doing any jumping, then we're going to want to do another, we're going to drag out 2 if-then loops inside of that else section. Actually, we'll drag a third in there too, but that won't be a part of the specific thing we're talking about right now. But those first 2 are going to be about the left and right arrow key being pressed. So we're going to drag out a sensing option. It's going to say key pressed. We're going to click, instead of key space pressed, we'll do right arrow, and then as well we'll do left arrow. So if key left arrow pressed and if key right arrow pressed, then we want it to switch costumes and to move in a certain way. So we're going to go grab the switch costumes. So we'll switch costume to right when we press the right arrow, and then left when we click the left arrow. So then with that being done, we're going to want to go down to variables and create a change in variable for each of the right and left arrow key pressed. And we'll do change scroll X for both of them, but scroll X is going to be negative, or it's going to be like -1, and then 1 for the right arrow. But we can change those values if you want to. I'm going to keep it at that for right now, though. And then once we've done that, we're going to also set, this is going to be a pretty long operator, so we're going to grab an AND operator, an equal operator, an OR operator, or a NOT operator, and an OR operator. So we're going to take that AND operator, and we're going to put the equal operator in the first bubble for the AND operator, okay? And then we're going to put the NOT inside of that second AND operator, and then the OR inside of the NOT operator. You got to go back and watch that. Feel free. Don't be too stressed. It's a lot to put in one little section. But we're going to say if on the ground equals, and since that equals 0, we're going to have this equal 1. So this means if he's on the ground and he's not going right and he's not going left, and so we'll do not right arrow or left arrow, okay? Drag out 2 of those key space pressed. We'll do not right arrow and not left arrow. Then we want to switch his costume back to regular bolts. So what this means is if he's on the ground, not in the air, and you're not pressing the right arrow or the left arrow, then we want to make sure that he's just in his regular starting costume. So here we'll go back to looks and do switch costume to, instead of jump, we'll do bolts. And so now he'll have his regular costume set up for that. But we also want to do another section called, or event, with the when I receive start game, and we're going to do another repeat until function that says until the game is over, so until stop equals 1. So do all that again. And what's going to happen here is because to make our bolts jump, we're going to use the spacebar. So if then, inside of another if then, so we'll have 2 if thens. And following that, we are going to say if key pressed and he's on the ground, then we want to, so if key space pressed, and you can choose whichever option you want out of there. If you want to use the up arrow to jump, then you can. I just use space. And then inside of that, if on the ground equals 1, so we'll set it equal to 1, and then go grab that on the ground variable, equals 1. Then we are going to want to set 2 variables in there. First, we're just going to set on the ground equal to 0, okay? Because as soon as the key space is pressed, it's got to switch that on the ground to be false. So it means now he's up in the air. But then we also want to make a new variable called velocity. So this is going to be how high or how fast or actually we'll call it bolt speed. But this says how fast or how high he can jump. So we'll set bolt speed inside of that if then loop as well to, let's say, 10. I think that should be good. So we'll do 10. And then we're going to also, lastly in there, we're going to go to motion, and we're going to do a change Y block to change that Y position of bolts to be velocity. Because right now we just set the bolt speed, but we need to actually tell it to move at bolt speed when it jumps. if that makes sense. So change y by a certain value, which right now is just 10. So after doing that, I'm just going to drag that over for some space. We'll grab a new when I receive start game, just to keep all of these different sections separated for you guys. Here, we are going to grab out a forever loop in the control section. And we're going to drag out an if then else loop in the control section. We'll go back to sensing, and it says if touching, and we're going to call this ground. That sprite. If you did not name it ground sprite before, then just look at what the sprite name is. But if touching ground, then we're going to want to go back to variables and set our on ground to 1. So that means that it is touching the ground, as I've explained to you guys before, but now we got to tell the game to actually know that as well. So if touching ground, then on the ground equals 1, so that means true. If not, which is the else part, then set on the ground to 0, okay? So here we are going to do just a little, I think one more section of code before we keep going, but you guys can take a second and pause and look at that. We're going to go back to events and do another when I receive start game. A lot of sections for this bolts code. I'm sorry, you guys are doing really well. We'll drag out a forever loop. And here we're going to make it so that when, we'll drag out an if then else loop as well. It's going to make it so that when it's bolts is in the air, that he's got to be able to come down at some point if you're not continuously pressing the spacebar. So I didn't mean to drag that out, but we're going to go and drag an equal operator where it says on the ground equals 1. So we'll drag that green equal operator, set that equal to 1, and then drag out a bubble variable for on the ground. So if on the ground equals 1, which means if bolts is touching the ground, then we're going to set on the ground to, we're going to do bolt speed, my bad. Set bolt speed to 0, okay? Because he's no longer jumping up in that Y direction, so we don't need him to keep moving extra. And we're going to change Y by that same bolt speed now. So instead, and I'll add that to the next one because we'll also have that there. But we're going to drag out that bolt speed variable bubble to both of those. But in that else section, we're also going to have it change if he is in the air. If bolt is still in the air but the key space is not being pressed, then we need to make sure that he comes down with gravity. So we're going to make a new variable called gravity. And then we're going to drag out that gravity option and put it in change bolt speed by gravity. And so we we'll set gravity in a second. We haven't set that yet, but that'll change it once we do that. For now though, I'm just gonna position these real quick. If you need to pause and catch up with any of this, please feel free. Again, very complicated code that you guys are learning, but you're doing very good. And I'm sure you're hanging in there. But now let's try and we're going to do another when I receive start game. And this is going to tell us if we're touching the snake, then we need the game to end, okay? So we're going to do a forever block and an if-then block inside of that forever loop. And we'll go to sensing and say, drag out that first one that says touching mouse pointer. We'll make it say touching snake. So if touching snake, if bolts runs into the snake or touches the snake, then we want it to stop the game. So we're going to go set, in the variables, set stop to 1. So this means stop equals true. So stop game, game over. But we're also going to broadcast message to not start the game, but to end the game. So we'll do game over. but we'll actually do game lost because we're going to have a game win option and a game lost option, okay? So set stop to 1 means game over equals true, but we're going to actually broadcast just the specific message game lost. So please take your time to make sure all of these are right. If not, then I've got all the code right here that you guys can compare to. But as well, we want to make sure that those variables that we see up in our program screen are no longer seen. So we're going to do when flag clicked. We want to make sure all of these variables are hidden and set. So we're going to hide each of those 5 variables that we see. So bolt speed, gravity, on the ground, and so on. So I'll just keep setting those, or hiding those, sorry. So once we've hit all of those variables, we won't be able to see those anymore on the screen, but we also need to set each of those variables too. So we're going to set, first we want to set our bolt speed, and that before was, actually we'll just drag out all of them first. So bolt speed was, we'll just keep it at 0 right now because we set it later when it is not in the air, but we're going to set gravity to a value of like negative point something. You can do like -1 if you want, but that's how fast bolts comes back down. We'll set on the ground to 1 because he is touching the ground at first. And we want that always to be true if he's not jumping. We're also going to set scroll X to 0 at first. And then lastly, we want to set stop equal to 0, which means that the game is not over, okay? Stop equals false if it's 0. After doing that, we have coded all of our bolts code, and so you guys can, or all of our bolts code, I guess, for now, because we're going to come back and do one little thing later, but this is all for just the regular game. What we'll come back for later is for the game lost and game win portions of the bolt code. Here, I'll zoom out even more if you guys need to pause and look. Again, it's all very complicated. Please pause and check what you need to. But now we want to go and start to code our, well, we'll look at our start screen and our ground. We're all good at those. We're all good with those. And then our clouds are all formatted. We just need to now, as well, our borders are good. We need to make our snake and our star code later. But here we want to make sure that we save. Again, I'm very bad at saving all my work, so I'm going to name it just a general Codemoji scroller game. And you guys can name it what you want, but you just press enter after that, and it'll save your work. You can click save now if you want to save more. It'll auto-save for you along the way. But there you guys see where I've gotten this far. And we will continue doing the rest of the code in the next part of this video.